Hey, all my good friends out there, Sam Haymart with Test Driven TV. I have just spent a week with the Toyota RAV4 Hybrid Woodland Edition, the off-roady, overlanding, chewy tired, get out in the middle of nowhere trim grade that, well, we're going to have a good look at it inside and out. We're going to take it for a drive out here in the middle of nowhere, and then I'm going to tell you what I really think. Okay, my friends, let's talk about the vehicle we've got here. 2024 Toyota RAV4 Hybrid, and this is the Woodland Edition. Now, what is the Woodland Edition? Well, first off, the Toyota Hybrid RAV4 has been around for quite a while. This is nothing new, but what they've done is they've added a new trim grade based on approximately the XLE trim grade. So it's not entirely a base model, but it's pretty close. And then they've added some off-road tuned suspension, off-road tires and wheels, a slight increase in ground clearance and approach and departure angles. So basically, they've taken a somewhat plain wrapper RAV4 and they've given it some extra off-road capability for the person that wants to be able to take it out on the trail, go camping with it, not be afraid to get it dirty. They didn't go all the way up to like the limited trim grade and get crazy with a really expensive vehicle here. As tested, we're pricing out at $36,000 and some change. It would be actually a little bit less money if not for the optional paint. So what do we have here? Well, if you look at the front, it's pretty plain because we are based on an XLE trim grade. Not a lot of flash going on there. We do have LED headlights, however, integrated fog lights. As we come around the corner, these wheels are some nice bronze colored TRD alloys, 18-inch, and then we've got 225 60 series Falcon all-terrain tires, and this is actually a pretty aggressive tire. I'm surprised to see it on a Toyota RAV4, and we'll sort of talk about what they offer when we get out here for a drive here in just a minute. Also standard, as you can see, are mud guards, which typically would be a dealership option, but they've actually made them standard on this trim grade. Other little details include black emblems and trim all around. The mirror caps, the door handles are all metallic black. As we come back to this view of the RAV4 Woodland, you can see a pretty good look at what's going on up here at the roof. This has the two-tone paint combination, army green, metallic black. I think it looks pretty cool. It's a nice cut line going back there at the rear pillar. And up on the top, a nice hardy roof rack. Now, it's got crossbar standard. This is something where Toyota is going to be pretty happy to sell you a lot of dealership accessories for up there, but you can also go with the aftermarket, obviously tents, ski racks, snowboard, whatever, bike racks even up there perhaps. A lot of options, whether it be at the dealership or the aftermarket. Now, as we come back here to the back, looking at the lower bumper, this has black exhaust tips, which are kind of nice, goes with the overall look and feel of the Woodland. And down there in the middle of the lower bumper is an activity mount. Most people are going to look at that and going, oh, that's a trailer hitch receiver. Well, that's not what they're calling it. They're calling it an activity mount. And so that's for bike racks. It's for maybe your cart. It's for other things. And theoretically, maybe you could put a small trailer hitch on that, but it's not a class 2 trailer hitch. This does have a 1,750 pound tow rating, but that is what they're calling an activity mount. It does come standard though. Looking at the rest of the rear of the vehicle, it says Woodland there right next to the hybrid badge. One thing I will point out is that this is not a power hatch. Most of the RAV4 hybrids come with a power hatch, but this one, it's notably absent. Now, I'm not complaining about it. I'm just noting that if you expect it, just because all the other trim grades come with it, it is missing on this one. That is a manual hatch. Like we talked about on the walk around, this is based on a trim grade that's right at or around the XLE, which means that the interior here is actually pretty basic. We have cloth seats and acres of black plastics. Not a lot of pizzazz going on here like you might find in some of the other trim grades of the RAV4, where there's higher level trims, bright colors, things like that. The steering wheel, for instance, not leather covered, not Softex covered, it's plastic. One of the things that the Woodland trim grade brings, however, are these great floor mats. These are all-weather tray style floor mats, and yes, it looks a little bit lived in. That's quite deliberate for extra effect. I've been out in the desert with the vehicle today, and I think it shows that you can get in and out of this and get it dirty and be able to just pick these floor mats up, dump out the dirt, clean them off, and you haven't wrecked your carpet. I love that. And yes, while there are a lot of options out there in the aftermarket to get mats like this, one of the benefits to these is the fact that, well, they say woodland on them, and they're a nice little theme, a little bit of a motif that helps add to the trim grade here. And that also is afforded out back in the cargo area. As you can see, a beautiful mat with lots of trees and the woodland logo. That's the kind of stuff that makes me smile when they actually sort of celebrate the trim grade and give you something extra for spending up into that space. And the nice thing about that mat is it's not just the floor in the cargo area. When you fold those seats down, it also extends to the seat back. So if you lay those seats down and you really load this up, you've got protection all the way. So when it comes to feature content in here, we are a little bit closer to the base level. We are not full of a lot of things like heated and cooled seats. We don't have the high-end audio system, but it's not completely plain. Ahead of me, a partial digital instrument cluster. It has a center screen that's customizable, and then analog gauges on the outside. The switchgear, average quality, average everyday switchgear, nothing really out of the ordinary. But I have to tell you that the current generation RAV4, I love these rubberized knobs. They have a nice high quality feel to them, and they really add to the sense of adventure and the ruggedness that the RAV4 portrays. The center stack is designed pretty simple, not the largest screen in the business here. Controls down below in the middle for the HVAC, and then down here a nice cubby for the phone. Because we are in a lower trim grade, does not have a wireless charger, but it is a nice spot to throw your phone and be able to keep an eye on what's going on with it if it lights up with something. Traditional gear lever here, and next to it, drive mode selector and the trail mode button, which we'll talk about here in just a minute when we get out for a drive. And the cup holders down low, a nice deep hole, so even if you have big gas station cups, they're not setting up too high. They're going to be almost flush with the top of this, so that's pretty well done there. Storage in here, pretty sizable. It's about the size of 1.5 square tissue boxes, and maybe a little bit deeper. There's plenty of room in here, plus some additional power ports. The rear seat of the RAV4 has been a place that's always been sort of an impressively roomy spot in this class. As you can see, I'm sitting here with these seats, which are set for my height, about 5'9", with my boots on. I've got 4 to 5 inches of room ahead of my knees. Pretty commendable here, and some of the competitors out there I've been in, not quite this roomy. The downside, I'm sitting down kind of low. My seating position is sort of down, my knees are perched up. I don't have a lot of support either. While this seat isn't entirely flat, I don't feel like I'm held in it. The good news is that there are a number of amenities back here that would be expected in any price point in this class, and they're here. Vents on the back of that center console, power ports down below, and here we have a fold down armrest with the cup holders on it. And as I sort of already showed you, this does have a nice big cargo area. These seats do fold down in a 60-40 split. Part of this trim grade gives you the 120 volt outlet at the back so that you can power things at your campsite, or when you go out hiking, you can have a cooler back there that's drawing off the electricity. And the best part, underneath that floor, even though it is a mini spare, there is a physical spare tire included in this vehicle, which is important because if you're using a vehicle like this for its intended purpose, you could always cut a tire open out there on the trail. So this is an interior that I'm very impressed with its versatility. I'm impressed with the ruggedness of some of the treatments and the accoutrements that it's been given. It is basic, and that goes along with where this is at in the trim grade lineup. But I will say though that for 40,000 bucks almost, I still think we're kind of missing a vinyl or leather covered steering wheel. The fact that I still have plastic in my hands at this price point doesn't quite rub me right. So almost there on the interior. It's definitely a step up from some of the competitors out there, but at this price, some of those competitors still offer more. This interior gets 4 out of 5 stars. The infotainment system here is not the largest screen that you're going to find in a lot of the competitors out there now. A lot of them are going to the larger and larger screens, but it is nearly fully featured. It has Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, it is wireless. What we don't have here is the top of the line JBL audio system, which is fine because even though you go for that with the top trim grades, it's not necessarily the best audio in my experience. So the audio quality here is class average. Most of the content that you can really reach into that's competitive is subscription based, which is to say that if you want navigation, if you want some of the concierge services, you're going to pay for that with a subscription, which honestly I don't really appreciate as a customer who just spent nearly $40,000 for this car to be also told, oh, by the way, if you want some of the extra bells and whistles that we advertised in our infotainment system, you have to pay extra for that in a subscription. Don't like it, especially when Kia, Hyundai, Honda, some of the other competitors out there give you that. You don't have to have a subscription. So I think Toyota is sort of on the wrong path here in that way. And the other thing I would say is that using these menus, navigating around, not the most intuitive system in the business. Some of the other competitors really do a much better job. And then lastly, you put it in reverse. This does have a backup camera, but only a single view backup camera. I think that given this is the Woodland Edition with extra off-road capabilities and sort of an off-road theme, should have a 360-degree monitor, especially when a lot of competitors out there at lower prices give that to you. So this is a system that, while good with what you get, is missing a lot for the money. It gets 4 out of 5 stars. All right, my friends, finally time to take a drive, and because we are in the off-roady Woodland Edition, what a better place to start our test drive than right here out on the trail. So this has a trail mode, which I am going to set. And the trail mode is essentially a software-driven extra traction control mode that's got a number of different parameters that raise the bar a little bit and help give you some extra traction capabilities out here in a more slippery, fluid environment. And so one of the things they call it in the specs is a virtual limited slip differential that just really pushes power to the right wheel. And that's important, specifically in the hybrid, because the hybrid RAV4, even though it does have virtual all-wheel drive, hasn't always had the best traction when it comes to off-roading mud, snow, and things like that. It hasn't been as good as some of the gas models that have a more traditional all-wheel drive system. This has the hybrid system up front. It has an electric motor at the rear. There's no drive shaft and hence no way to physically lock. So this trail mode sort of bridges that gap a little bit. But enough of me talking. Let's take it for a drive. And so this is just a mild trail with a little bit of challenge to it, a little bit of traction challenge. Unfortunately, we're not in monsoon season out here in the desert yet, so we don't have any mud. Sorry, I wish we did, but we do have loose rocks. So that ought to be good enough to really sort of see how this trail mode works. Now, this does have the TRD off-road tuned suspension, so it's got unique dampers, unique springs, unique rubber bushings and jounce bumpers, and so that actually helps the ride out here be a little bit more robust when it comes to a rougher trail than most RAV4s really never experience, right? They're about crawling the malls and the city streets. So we're going up a pretty steep hill here, and there's some ruts and things like that. One of the things this does not have are some really robust skid plates underneath. That was not part of the package. Something you might expect on a TRD Pro. Now we are coming up to a pretty challenging spot here where it's kind of a mogul, and so we're getting a little bit of slippage here, and so I'm just going to lay into the throttle and tell it I really want it to work, and there it goes. So it really sort of articulated the traction control to stop those spinning wheels and give us the traction we needed on this loose gravel. Because we are in a small crossover SUV, this has a nice tight turning circle. And now we are going to go back down this pretty steep hill with loose rocks. And I've got my foot on the brake, and this has sort of a sense of a hill descent control that I can really feel working, but it's not a hill descent control as labeled. But I can feel it working there. I can hear it. It makes a lot of noise when the system's articulating the brakes on some of these slippery surfaces where maybe one of those wheels starts to slip a little bit. The ground clearance on this, obviously, more than adequate to go through that. And so what I've really noticed is that it just makes it effortless. You don't feel like you have to be a pro to navigate some of these things that most people would look at and go, not sure about that. And not once did I scrape anything. And I mentioned the fact that this doesn't have skid plates. And so, you know, if you want something with skid plates and you're going to be doing that kind of off-roading, this probably isn't the vehicle for you anyway. This is about being able to go a little bit further down the trail, maybe go camping, maybe go hiking, whatever it is, than you might in a car or a standard RAV4. If you're into off-roading, go buy a Jeep Wrangler. But I think my big takeaway so far out here on this trail is the fact that this has a nice solid ride. The suspension is tuned to make this rough stuff a little bit more forgiving overall. And it definitely does that. And most importantly, it feels pretty solid. Wow, look at these big bulls. Okay, let me get moving. Wow, there's some pretty big animals. So off-road trail, check. Now it's time to go on my favorite desert washboard road. So out here, while this isn't really hardcore off-roading, this ribbed washboard surface can make even some of the best SUVs out there feel like a complete POS. What it really takes to make a vehicle handle and drive well out here is a solid chassis, a well bolted together interior, and suspension that doesn't rattle, shake, shudder, or otherwise just make you feel like it's not bolted together that good. And so what I'm finding so far is that while this is a unibody car-based crossover that normally transmits all of this vibrating rhythm straight into your seat, they've done a pretty good job of isolating some of that rougher stuff. And so while I am getting some rattling and shaking in here in the interior, I'm not feeling anything through the steering that's telling me that the suspension's loose or not otherwise tightly bolted together and tuned. And so around these gravel corners, I can sort of toss it into a corner and the stability control steps in if you push it just a little too far. So if you start to get a little bit of pitch and yaw, a little bit of a slide going around these corners, it does a pretty good job of stepping in pretty quick, and I can just feel it. Yeah, just like that. And obviously it can't completely overcome the laws of physics if you go too crazy. But if you're just out for a daily drive out here, going out to your favorite hiking spot, and you happen to hit a patch of really loose stuff, you're not going to end up over there in the wash. So it feels pretty good out here, I have to say. It's not too noisy. It doesn't rattle too much. It does have just a little bit of that going on, but that's to be expected in a car-based crossover. So it checks out here in the wild. But you know, the most important part, back to reality, is how does it drive on the pavement? So on the pavement here in my neighborhood, driving around town, this is a vehicle that doesn't feel much different than a standard RAV4 Hybrid. It's got a nice supple feel in its steering. It's a lot more lively and engaging than the RAV4 used to be in the last generation, and that's in part because it's on the new TNGA architecture. And so it's a new chassis platform Toyota devised some time back that it doesn't feel dead to the world. It's actually fun to drive. It's got reasonably good steering feel, and it's got a nice quiet ride in most situations. Out on the highway on our 70-mile-an-hour test, road noise is about average, 60.2 decibels. Average for me in most of the cars I test is right around 61, so maybe it's just a tick less, but right in the average ballpark it is. Driving around town, speed bumps, manhole covers, it usually feels pretty solid, although I have noticed that going in and out of, say, driveways at shopping centers where you get some twist on the body, I do get a little bit of creaking in here. But wind noise, for the most part, good. And with these all-terrain tires, road noise, well, we talked about that. It's about average. I don't really notice any drone from these tires above and beyond what you might get with the standard street tires. So having that extra off-road capability that we sort of enjoyed out there on the trail doesn't seem to hurt the on-road experience. So it's pretty much like any other RAV4 driving around town and out on the highway. This chassis gets 4 out of 5 stars. Last but not least, now it's time to talk about what's under the hood. So the first question I always like to ask in all of my test drives, well, in this case, it's going to be one of the last, is how does it go? So we're going to come to a complete stop. and go. Ooh, comes to life pretty quickly. And 60. Now, it's got pretty good power. I would say it's a little bit better than class average. As to hybrids, certainly not a slouch. And so stepping up to a hybrid to get the increased fuel economy certainly doesn't mean you're going to be dealing with less horsepower than the standard gasoline model. In fact, you've actually got more. Under the hood, 2.5 liter Toyota hybrid system, 219 horsepower. And at the rear axle is an additional electric motor, as we talked about. So we do have standard all-wheel drive here. So driving it around town, if you've driven a Toyota hybrid before, it feels just like anything else. Camry hybrid, a Prius. This is a powertrain that's been around for a while. It's proven. There's no big question marks around this anymore. Toyota knows how to do this, and so it's got a pretty good refinement level, although it can get a little bit agricultural if you really press it hard like we did back there. You do get that leaf blower effect just a little bit because we do have an electronic continuously variable transmission scheme, right? And so that means it doesn't have a traditional transmission that's shifting gears and gives you that traditional feel. When you step on the gas, it just drones. But there's plenty of power. It'll get you a ticket. Now, while we do have all-wheel drive, this actually really operates in front-wheel drive most of the time, unless you dial up the drive mode to really push it into working both of the motors simultaneously. It doesn't have a four-wheel drive lock per se, but it really only engages that rear axle when extra power is needed back there. And so it's sort of an on-demand type of system. But as we found out there on the trail, it tends to work pretty good. Now, fuel economy really is the name of the game here. That's why you buy the hybrid, right? This is rated at 38 city, 35 highway, and 37 MPG combined. Pretty good for a mid-size SUV. In fact, it's not bad at all. In my week with it, I actually got about 36, and that's mostly city driving and the air conditioner's on. It's starting to warm up here in Phoenix, and so this is the time of the year that I always give a little bit of slide for maybe 1 or 2 MPG less than promised. So we're right up there with the ballpark of what is promised here. So in the final analysis with powertrain, this is not the most exciting vehicle to drive. If you're a driving enthusiast, you're not going to have paddle shifters, you're not going to be shifting gears, and yes, it can sort of get droney and leaf blower like if you really push it hard, but if you're just driving it around every day, it's hard to beat. This powertrain gets 4 out of 5 stars. All right, my friends, there you have it, the Toyota RAV4 Hybrid Woodland Edition. So I have driven quite a few of the off-roady themed crossover SUVs that have come out in the last year. It's getting to be kind of a trend. Almost everybody offers an off-roading, overlandy kind of flavor now to their SUV lineup. People like that. You buy an SUV, you want adventure, you want to take it out here in the wild, and you want to feel like you've got something that's going to do it without coming home broke and scraped up or otherwise soiled. And what I like about this one is the fact that they've given us a mid-grade trim level to start with. It's not all the way up to limited or platinum or diamond, and then they've added all the off-roady stuff on top of that. No, this is mid-level to almost, you know, entry level when it comes to equipment levels, interior, and how it's put together, priced. And so $36,000 and some change, not the cheapest RAV4 you can get, but it's certainly nowhere close to the most expensive one. So I like the fact that they've given us something that you can take out, you can get dirty, you can use it and not feel like you're hurting your fine leathers. You know what I'm saying? And so the extra off-road capability that you get here with these tires, the suspension, trail mode, the extra slight little bit of ground clearance and approach and departure angles that are a little bit better than the standard RAV4, I think really elevates your capabilities. And there's a lot of the trim grades on these competitors out there, Volkswagen, Kia, for example, that stepping up to this off-roady trim grade actually doesn't give you any extra capability whatsoever. This does. So it may not be all the way up to Jeep Wrangler territory, right? But, and honestly, some of the Jeep competitors to this do offer quite a bit more, but that's what they do. This is a nice blend of affordability and capability. So I think they've done a good job here. Now, is it competitive? Is it a good value? Well, $36,000 here. You can spend a little bit more if you get the winter package, but we're kind of almost there to the top of where you can go with this. I think it's a good deal. So warranty coverage, not the longest in the business. Toyota usually doesn't. Some people would say, who cares? You don't need it. But I do look at that. Quality, good quality, probably good longevity, but it does feel kind of rental grade when you drive it around for a while. It's, you know, it's not a Mercedes-Benz inside and out. But that said, I put value and competitiveness at 4 out of 5 stars. When you put that in with everything else we've talked about, we're a solid 4 out of 5 stars for the review. Pretty good. So yeah, I think it's pretty neat. I like it. I like this color too. I really think it looks sexy, especially a little bit dusty. They've really offered a nice combination of look, feel, and capability here. So there you go, the RAV4 Woodland Edition Hybrid. Yeah, so if you like what we do, see our latest video right there, but better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel right down there and stay informed of everything we do.